I know you've missed me. So turn the volume up, hit that like button right away to let me know you've been waiting for the next news updates from me, and let's dive in. Today, I've got a lot of interesting things to tell you. We will talk about the Russian dictator's envoy, Dmitriev, meeting with Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff in Washington. We will also look at how American attitudes towards Ukraine, the EU, and Canada are getting worse while sympathy for Russia is growing. I will tell you about terrible missile strike that has just happened. Russians again targeted children's playground. And how will Trump's new tariffs affect Ukraine? Plus, Sweden is preparing for World War III, and the US isn't even planning to attend the next Ramstein meeting. On April 2nd, Kirill Dmitriev, an envoy representing Russian President Vladimir Putin, met with US Special Representative Steve Witkoff in Washington, marking the first visit of such a senior Russian official to the United States since the war against Ukraine began. The meeting occurred just when we heard reports that Trump was growing disappointed with the slow progress of ceasefire negotiations. According to Reuters, which cites two unnamed American officials, Dmitriev's visit might turn him into a key figure for shaping relations between the US and Russia. Dmitriev arrived in Washington at Witkoff's invitation. To facilitate this trip, given that Dmitriev is under US sanctions, the White House had to grant a special short-term license. Analysts speculate that his role could become pivotal in restoring ties between Moscow and Washington. Dmitriev, who studied at Stanford and once worked for Goldman Sachs, is said to be among the most knowledgeable of Russia's representatives on US affairs. He was previously a lead negotiator in Saudi Arabia for discussions between Russian and American delegations. With strong connections to key Republican figures, he now holds the distinction of being the highest-ranking Russian official to set the foot in the US since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. In recent statements, Dmitriev alluded to several initiatives for Russia-US cooperation in areas such as investment, energy, Arctic development, space exploration, rare metals, and even potential collaboration with tech guy Elon Musk. Well, giving these grand plans, ranging from sorting out ceasefires to possibly teaming up in outer space. I mean, after all, why settle for mere diplomacy when you could strike a deal on Earth, the Arctic, and Mars at once, if only forging international peace were as simple as handing out special licenses to sanctions officials. So, what exactly did Dmitriev say? After meetings in Washington, Dmitriev claimed that Moscow hopes to restore dialogue with the United States. According to Putin's envoy, his dialogue was supposedly cut off. This dialogue was supposedly cut off by Biden's administration, and now many countries are trying to prevent its restoration. Dmitriev said that in the US, Russia's position is being heard and that the US is allegedly open to constructive solutions. He also noted that during his visit, there were numerous talks about mutual investments. He claimed Russian authorities see a strong desire for American companies to return to the Russian market. But, here's the twist, business will only be allowed where it is beneficial for Russia and approved by the Russian government. He also emphasized that Russia has not been included in the new tariffs introduced by Trump against other countries and said the US and Russia are negotiating to restore a direct air travel. On top of that, he mentioned cooperation in the Arctic and reviving religious and cultural ties between the two nations. Now, here is something you probably didn't know. Kirill Dmitriev, born in Kiev, now has Russia's direct investment fund and is reportedly close to Putin's daughter. It looked like he was the one who organized the first US-Russia back-channel talks. Dmitriev has strong connections to Western investors and influential figures, which has helped him remain a key player in Russian politics and business despite US sanctions. He previously worked in Ukraine and has known ties to Russian intelligence. According to former KGB and Russian Foreign Intelligence Officer Sergei Zhirnov, who spoke to Ukraine's Channel 24, Dmitriev traveled to the US not just to talk about Russia's war on Ukraine, but to negotiate broader US-Russia relations and possible business deals. Even more interesting, Dmitriev may be discussing personal financial benefits for Vladimir Putin. Through his wife, he is reportedly linked to Putin's younger daughter, giving him the authority to talk about the Kremlin's family's money. What's unusual here is that Russia hasn't had such a publicly visible emergence of a new power broker until now. There are even reports on a rift between Dmitriev and Sergei Lavrov. While Lavrov pushes a hardline, hawkish stance, Dmitriev is the one calling for improved US-Russia relations and cooperation. Well, guys, what do we have here? While the world's leaders discuss, negotiate, and look for business opportunities, when Russia, innocent Ukrainians continue to die. As Russia relentlessly targets our cities, it's frustrating to see how certain powers are so quick to forget the atrocities that are happening right before our eyes. And now, Russia's representative Dmitriev, after his talks in Washington, expressed that Moscow hopes to restore dialogue with the US, claiming that the Biden administration disrupted it. Absolutely not Russia's war and genocide of Ukrainians. It's almost laughable because in a time of bloodshed, these discussions are focused not on accountability or war crimes, but on business opportunities and mutual investments. Let's take a moment to absorb this. Russian officials are pushing for economic relations while civilians are buried under rubble in Ukraine. Is this really the world we want to live in? We are told by Dmitriev that Russia sees great desire for American companies to return to Russian markets. They are negotiating about restoring air travel, discussing joint operations in the Arctic, and religious and cultural exchange amidst the mass killing of Ukrainian civilians. And just to remind everyone, Dmitriev is not a casual diplomat. He is a key figure in Russia's inner circle, connected to Putin's daughter, and has a history of close ties with Western investors. So, what do we have here? A whole lot of talking about money and very little about justice. As Ukraine fights for its survival, we must ask, where is the accountability for the crimes Russia has committed in Ukraine? Why does the international community seem more interested in business deals and dialogue with war criminals than in holding them accountable? No one should expect Ukrainians simply forget the thousands of lives lost. You see, when the war doesn't hit homes of the powerful, the international norms and laws somehow take a backseat. Suddenly, dialogue about the future of Ukraine becomes about deals and dollars, while the rest of us are left to pick up the pieces. So let's stop pretending that international law applies equally to all. It's only enforced when it's used the powerful, and right now it's clear those in power are more concerned about the money that can be made from these negotiations than they are about justice for Ukraine. This is a dangerous game. Sooner or later, the war won't be just in Ukraine, you know. Europe must prepare for this reality, because if we continue to normalize this type of diplomatic failure, the next war could very well knock on Europe's doorstep. The era of peace is over. Welcome to era of militarization. It's time for the world to wake up and, oh well, whatever. Yeah, well, it's gonna be a disaster one day, and everyone will realize this probably will be too late. Well, on this positive note, this evening, Russia's invading army launched a ballistic missile strike on a residential neighborhood in Kryvyi Rih. A children's playground stood near the impact site. According to the latest reports, the occupiers killed 16 people, 6 of them were children. Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation reported that the strike was carried out with a cluster ballistic missile. And the Russians' murderers at the Ministry of Murders proudly reported a successful strike. At least they admitted it, so they can't claim Ukraine bombed itself this time. The murdered children, they called military commanders and foreign instructors who supposedly gathered at a restaurant. I've posted videos on my Twitter. It's horrifying. Parents sitting by the lifeless bodies of their children, a father's phone ringing, calling his son who's now lying dead on the playground. I truly hope Rubio, Vance, Trump, all of them see this footage. I hope they finally understand that what peace looks like in Russia's language. Maybe they need glasses if they still can't see it. This is yet more proof Russia is deliberately targeting the Ukrainian people for destruction, and was the big topic of discussion in America right now. Starting new business deals with Russia. How far have you fallen? Will anyone even say the word accountability? Or will the world keep closing its eyes, talking about lifting sanctions and signing new contracts? Then later over dinner they will pray, speak of Christian values and draw crosses on their foreheads while children die in playgrounds. But it's not their children yet. And by the way, look what I found for you. A fresh survey by The Economist and YouGov reveals how President Donald Trump's rhetoric may be reshaping Americans' views on their longtime allies. The change appears most pronounced among Republicans since Trump returned to the White House. Before the election, only 12% of Republican voters considered Canada unfriendly or an enemy. But according to the poll conducted March 22nd, 25th, that figure has now more than doubled to 27%. A similar shift occurred with perceptions of the European Union. Last year, 17% of Republicans labeled the EU unfriendly or an enemy, whereas 29% now do so. When it comes to Russia, public opinion seems to be moving in the opposite direction. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, around 85% of registered voters overall reviewed Russia as unfriendly or an enemy. That figure stayed fairly consistent until the 2024 presidential election season. Now, among Republicans, 72% continue to regard Russia as enemy, while the proportion of Republicans calling Ukraine an enemy has risen by 10 percentage points over the same period. Interestingly, even Democratic voters seem to be easing their stance toward Russia slightly and becoming warier of America's long-standing partners. The Economist knows it's difficult to determine whether these small shifts will prove lasting or just temporary fluctuations in public opinion. So, what's going on with Trump's tariffs and what does it mean for Ukraine and the world? On April 2nd, Donald Trump announced new tariffs on imports from around 185 countries, calling them response tariffs for what he claimed was those countries getting rich off America. The tariffs range between 10% and 49%. Here are a few examples. EU countries 20%, the UK 10%, Vietnam 46%, and Ukraine also 10%. Ukraine's economy minister Yulia Sviridenko said the situation is difficult but not critical. Ukraine, she explained, wasn't hit with as high tariffs as some other country like Moldova 31% or the EU 20%. But put things into perspective, in 2024 Ukraine exported $874 million goods to the US, including $363 million in pig iron and $112 million in pipes. Meanwhile, Ukraine imported $3.4 billion worth of goods from the US. Ukrainian tariffs on American goods are very low, 10% on cars, 0% on coal and oil. So Sviridenko said there is room to negotiate better terms. The US announcement even explicitly allows for such dialogue. If the 10% tariff stays, the hardest hit will be small producers. Ukraine exports over 600 categories of goods to the US, and 65 of those categories exceed 1 million in trade volume. Her message is clear: Ukraine has something to offer as a reliable partner and ally. And fair trade benefits both countries, she said. Also, Russia and Belarus are not even on Trump's tariff list. Why? US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent later explained. The US doesn't import much from Russia or Belarus anyway. While White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said sanctions have already stopped any meaningful trade with Russia, Belarus, North Korea, and Cuba. So there is no need for additional tariffs. Still, the US continues to trade more with Russia than with some on the countries that are on Trump's new tariff list, like Mauritius and Brunei. Just think about that for a second. And speaking of US defense efforts, for the first time ever, the US will skip the next Ramstein Defense Summit. Pentagon Chief Pete Heck said not going to attend it in Brussels on April 11th. Neither virtually no representation anyway will be sent. Meanwhile, across Europe, alarm bells are ringing. Sweden has announced an investment of $7.7 million to upgrade its civilian defense bunkers, warning citizens to prepare for the risk of war with Russia's aggression continuing in Ukraine. Sweden already has 64,000 shelters capable of holding 7 million people. That's over 2/3 of the population. But now, after joining NATO in March 2024, Sweden is reinforcing its nuclear bunkers with upgraded filters to protect against chemical and radioactive attacks. The project is expected to take 2 to 3 years. At the same time, the European Union has instructed all 27 member states to ensure every household has a 3-day emergency survival kit in case of war or natural disaster. Now listen, friends, I'm not here to scare you, but we do need to be prepared. It might be wise to stock up on a couple packs of spaghetti, get yourself a flashlight and a spare power bank. And hey, on a weekend, maybe take a walk and find out where the nearest bomb shelter in your neighborhood. Trust me, that knowledge might be useful one day. That's it for today. I want to thank all of you for supporting Ukraine, watching Ukrainian content. Please like this video. You can support the channel's development on Patreon and buy me a coffee. The empire will fall. See you soon. And Slava Ukraini!